When we moved into our house in 2018, this is what our kitchen looked like. It wasn't in our budget to renovate our kitchen right away, so we painted the cabinets, but I hated this yellow Formica countertop. We thought that this countertop paint kit could hold us over until we got to our renovations, which we thought would only be a year from that time. There are some countertop paint kits that contain epoxy, and there are some that don't. This one did not. Fast forward, and we haven't done our renovation, and I want to share how this has held up over the past few years. I also wanted to share some cost-effective ways we've made some upgrades to our kitchen throughout these past few years. I also wanted to give you all a tour of our kitchen the way it is now before we start working on our renovations. My husband worked meticulously on getting these marble veins just right. After we were done, I think it looked pretty good, much better than the yellow. If I remember correctly, that first year, things were holding up pretty well. I don't remember that there was any peeling, any chipping, unless you scratched it with a blade, then I don't remember it coming off. Things started to show some visible wear that second year. It started to show some wear in the areas that were more heavily used, like areas around the sink or where we set things down more often. Later into that second year and beyond is when it really started to start peeling off. In that first year, you could wipe it down and it felt like a surface you could clean. Eventually, it started to stain in some areas and just look really kind of gross. It started to feel like something I couldn't really clean. Between water and regular use, that was enough for it to start peeling. Fast forward to now, and this is what it was looking like. Now we're at a point where we are just done. So I have been scraping it off little by little over the past week. I wanted to make this video now before I took it all off. I'll show you how it looks in these different areas. I already started to scrape off the worst areas. My husband and I keep telling ourselves that we never thought we would be so excited to see the yellow Formica countertop. Just a much more usable surface that feels sanitary compared to the areas that we're peeling. I'm sitting on our counter area, which doesn't get much water, but it does get used pretty often for us eating. So here you could see how it has held up. This is the more heavily used area of the countertop. And as we get closer to the wall over there, an area that gets less used and just has some things sitting on it. So you could see the difference between how areas that are used look with areas that are not really used. Here is the area that I removed. So you can see everything I've removed so far is around the sink and around the areas that are really heavily used. I can only speak to my experience with the specific kit that we bought. The main considerations are how long you plan to use it for and the area that you plan to use it in. So if I were to use it again in an area near a sink, I would know that that is not going to hold up very long. But then again, if it's in an area that's not really used, like the backsplashes and the corners where there really isn't much contact, that's gonna hold up a lot longer. So if I were to do it again, knowing that it would be a few years before we got to our renovation, I would not have gone with this kit that we bought. It was not a good experience for things to get to a place where it didn't feel sanitary. Double check the kit that you're considering. Some are called countertop paint kits, which may not contain epoxy. This one did not, and that's very likely why it hasn't held up very well. I got it off of the areas that we really used to work on. Maybe I'll take it all off. I'm still not sure if it's worth the effort, and just leaving it as is until we get to our renovation. I was able to scrape it off with a putty knife without any strippers in the areas that were, again, already starting to peel off near the water, but it's much harder to take off in the areas where it's still very bonded to the Formica. So again, I'm not sure if I'm gonna go through the trouble of taking it all off, knowing that we're gonna get to renovating this hopefully in the near term. I hope it was helpful to hear both the positives and the downsides. I do think it looked so much better than the Formica, especially right at the beginning when we had just finished it up, but over time it just did not hold up. Let's transition over to a more fun conversation, which are some tips on how we were able to save on some other upgrades we made to the kitchen to make it more comfortable, usable, and a little more aesthetic than it was from when we first moved into the original 1950s kitchen. I mentioned we had a yellow refrigerator when we first moved in. If you've been here before, you know that I look for just about everything secondhand before I decide to buy something new. When we first moved into the house, my husband and I went to the Restore Habitat for Humanity, a secondhand shop or op shop for those of you in Australia. We checked out those stores often, and one thing we were looking for was a new refrigerator, since the one we had was also really old. It works fine actually, and it's in our garage. But we ended up finding this refrigerator at the Restore for $250. We did have to pay for delivery, and I want to say that was maybe around $150 or so. For about $400, we got this refrigerator. It did have a defect. The defect that it does have is that the LED screen here is a little hard to read on one side. It just tells you the temperature of the inside of the refrigerator, and you can still make out the number that it says. It's a Frigidaire refrigerator. It was new other than that defect on the screen, and for $400. Check out secondhand stores for appliances too. It might not be the latest model, but you might be able to find something newer than what you have. Our stove is another piece we managed to upgrade secondhand. This is an electric 6-burner Viking stove that I managed to find free on Craigslist. It's an older model. The people giving it away for free were upgrading it to an induction top, which is what we plan to do in the future. We drove to their house. It was sitting on the curb and we popped it in our car, and we were very happy to take it off their hands. It ended up fitting almost perfectly. There is a gap right here. I found this at Home Depot. Kind of never glued it down, but to cover up that gap, we just put that right here. But otherwise was a perfect fit. My dad helped us with the electrical work and putting it in here, and it has been a nice upgrade from the original 1950s stove that was here. I really try to avoid creating waste, and I did hear from someone and they came and picked it up. They took it and then they reached back out to let me know that they were harvesting different components out of it, and that made me so happy. Since the kitchen is in the front of the house, I wanted to add another layer of privacy by adding shades. Window treatments can be expensive. I also wasn't sure what type of window treatment I want. I did get this secondhand. I think I got it for around $30. If you've been here before, you know that I'm a fan of getting things secondhand for very low cost or free to try to experiment in the space. So this is one of my experimental pieces. Since we are going to replace the windows in the future, I didn't want to make that investment for the right forever piece, since again, we wouldn't be able to use them for the new windows. I managed to find this that is almost a perfect fit. The only thing is, that's where it stops, which is too bad because it's a perfect fit width-wise, but it's given me the opportunity to see what a shade like this looks like, a light filtering shade versus completely blocking out the light. Let's end with a tour of the space. When we first moved into the house, we thought it was so cool that there was this rotisserie on the backside of the fireplace. It works. And then here's this pocket door, which takes us to the front of the house. If you come through the front door, you see our living room, and then you can turn into the kitchen as well through the pocket door. And then if you're in the dining area, you could also enter the kitchen through here. And there used to be a wall from the fireplace to this corner. I mentioned before that my husband is an amazing cook and he is passionate about cooking. So when we moved in, the house came with this room called a hobby room, which we have turned into our pantry. So as a part of our renovation, we plan to turn this into a butler's pantry. I'll give you all a proper tour in the future, probably bring you all along for organizing the pantry. It is starting to pour outside and getting a little dark, so let's end it here. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It lets me know that you all enjoyed this and that I should continue making more videos about our kitchen. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you all at the next one.